credit to the Paramount for letting me just go talk to the most senior executives and ask all these questions, because this does not happen every day. I think if any other media company is paying attention, please welcome us into your headquarters, serve us lunch, and let us question and interrogate your most senior, most executives for a couple hours. That would be lovely.
Welcome to Powerlines. I'm John Passantino.
And I am Oliver Darcy.
Today we're discussing Sean Hannity lashing out at Trump's critics as the MAGA Civil War rages on. But first, Skydance executives held court with the press, with David Ellison taking questions for the first time. Oliver, you were in the room today in New York at Paramount headquarters where this was held. What was it like there?
Yeah, I just got back. You can see my Paramount badge. It says now on there, a Skydance Corporation. So that's what they're, Paramount and Skydance Corporation. Yeah, it was actually remarkable, John. I have been covering media for, I guess, more than a decade now, and I have never seen a situation where senior media executives actually get on stage and hold a press conference and take questions from us journalists. And so it was just from that perspective, almost remarkable, and credit to them for sitting there and taking the hard questions. This happened right after the deal closed. It was a few hours afterward. They had David Ellison had toured CBS News and talked to some CBS News folks, and then he sat with the press. And as you might imagine, the very first question that came up was, do you have a side deal with Donald Trump to run public service announcements that he likes on your network? And while I give him credit for sitting there and taking these questions, they did not provide a direct answer on that. And David Ellison gave a spiel about how he does not want to politicize the company on day one and didn't directly answer it. And then, as you might imagine, the second question was like, wait a second, do you have a side deal with the president? So basically reiterating the question, trying to get clarity. And he again declined to directly answer the question, said he did not want to politicize it. Politicize the company. And then he did the thing where he said he answered the question already, even though he hadn't really answered it. He said he thinks he's been clear, even though I think everyone in the room was probably thinking, well, not really, you haven't been clear. And I'm imagining he was coached pretty well on what answer to give in terms of how to answer that question. And I suspect that after the press conference, he did some mingling around that he was probably asked that question a few more times and probably did not provide any, he did not deviate from his talking points.
Yeah, I feel like this is a tough one for him, right? I mean, the only reason we really have heard that there is this supposed public service announcement, secret wink, handshake deal between Ellison and Donald Trump to get the long tortured Paramount Skydance merger across the finish line this month is because there was this deal that they would provide up to $20 million in these advertisements. But if he's now going in front of the press and now being asked to confirm that this is authentic, he's now faced with this scenario where if he denies it, which obviously everyone inside of CBS and CBS News is hoping that this is not true, that that they're not going to provide this sort of propaganda style content for free on their broadcast in order to get this deal done. But also, if you're Ellison, are you now going to potentially upset the president by going on the record and saying that never was true, he's making it up, whether it's real or not? Or he goes out and he acknowledges it's true and then faces effectively the firing squad of the press who's all assembled there in front of him, this is just going to completely dominate the entire press conference at this point.
He's not going to confirm that he made a secret side deal with Donald Trump. I mean, obviously he wouldn't do that. That would make no sense because it's supposed to be a side deal and you don't really confirm those. I thought what was remarkable though, or one of the themes of this, was they were going out of their way not to say anything that could be perceived as critical of Donald Trump. So I asked David Ellison a couple questions, but one of the questions during the press conference was a very broad question. I said, I understand you don't want to politicize things, but I asked him broadly what he makes of Donald Trump attacking the press. And I think most, if I asked the head of the New York Times, A.G. Sulzberger, or the head of CNN, Mark Thompson, or any of these news leaders. I told him, you're now a news owner. I think that they would say that obviously the attacks on the press today that we see are unacceptable. And it's dangerous, and we should be supportive of a free press. I asked David Ellison the same question, and I gave him that sort of broad context. I think I said, broadly speaking, like, what do you make of these attacks? And I did not hear like a strong defense of the talent. I asked specifically, I said, Donald Trump is attacking Gayle King this week, the CBS Mornings co-anchor. And, he gave me a very general answer about how, I'll read to you. He says he wouldn't want to politicize things. That's the first thing he said. And then he said he's been supportive of talent, and he talked about being supportive of people like Tom Cruise, when he's run Skydance. But he did not directly say anything that Donald Trump would not like. And I thought throughout the press conference that was a common theme. They were clearly trying to avoid saying anything that could get them on the bad side of the White House, which is, pretty notable. I mean, I think even Rupert Murdoch, if I asked him, what do you make of Donald Trump's attacks on the press? I think he might even say that they're unacceptable. I mean, the Wall Street Journal has the editorial board, and that basically speaks for Rupert Murdoch. So very notable that did not hear that from Paramount. And I honestly, going into this, did I think that David Ellison was going to give a full-throated, sharp-edged rebuttal of Donald Trump? No. I did not think that was going to happen. But I did think that he was going to try to check a box that says, I'm going to stand up for CBS News, and just carefully say, or maybe broadly, attacks on the press by partisans and politicians when we're doing fact-based journalism is not acceptable, and we're not going to be intimidated by it from anyone at CBS News. Didn't really hear that from him today.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like this is a very difficult, delicate situation for him as well. His father, Larry Ellison, who is now the second richest man in the world, and owes a lot of that because of his ownership and founding of Oracle, some of which involves government contracts and deals. His father, Larry, is also interested in potentially buying TikTok or becoming the future American owner, parent of this company. It feels like his son, who is the heir to much of this and is using these dollars to buy Paramount, probably doesn't want to rock the boat too much, both for himself, potentially for future deals under this administration, but also for his father, who is also deeply enmeshed, is showing up at the White House, is talking to the president, shaking hands with him, that Ellison going out and talking to the public and condemning attacks on the press and any of that pushback feels like that actually could get kind of troubling for him. He'd sort of step in the mud there.
So a couple things on that, John. During the press conference, Ben Mullen from the New York Times alluded to the possibility that Larry Ellison, David Ellison's father, one of the world's wealthiest men now, might get TikTok if it's sold. And so that is definitely, I think, something lurking potentially in the background where they may not want to irritate Donald Trump because they probably want TikTok, or Ellison wants TikTok, right? But, I was talking to Ellison and David Ellison afterward with a couple other reporters, and he said, this is what he said. He said, half of my family is basically Republican, half of my family is Democrat. And he said his vision for CBS News was talking to the broad base of the country, where how do we get people to trust us from the center left and the center right? And I actually told him I didn't think it was possible to get, to talk to the majority of the country anymore because everything's so fragmented and so polarized. And frankly, Republicans are often living in a world where they don't want to hear facts that contradict the worldview that they have. But that was his vision. That's what he said he wanted CBS News to do, and we'll see if he can do it. Good luck to him. I think a lot of people have tried, and I don't know of any news organization that's broadly trusted by Republicans. I even told him, I said the Wall Street Journal, I think, would be a center-right organization, right? And Donald Trump's suing Rupert Murdoch over their coverage, and they're now enemy number one, perhaps, in MAGA media. So, and he didn't really have any, he said it was day one and they're going to try. But that'll be interesting. And also during the press conference, another reporter asked him, I forget who, but they pointed out that they had told the FCC that they were going to basically root out bias, and they asked him if he could point out instances where he thinks that CBS News has been biased, and he declined to point out specific instances, but did say that he thinks they can do better, which is of course easy to do, I guess. Not name anything in particular, but say that you can do better. And I think it is still very clear that they do. They're basically using coded language to say that they want to appeal more to conservatives, and how they do that, I think, remains to be seen. Maybe it's Barry Weiss coming in. He was asked about Barry Weiss as well during the press conference, and said he would not comment on rumors and speculation regarding whether he's going to buy Barry Weiss's publication, The Free Press.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, actually. I'm glad you brought that up. So in the last few days, we've seen Ellison and Skydance name the full slate of executives that are coming in that are going to run Paramount. A lot of big names, including Jeff Shell, who was there in the room today. But sort of oddly missing from all of this is the new head of CBS News. It's currently run by Tom Schabrowski. I hope I'm saying his name correctly there. And Tom, it seems, is going to continue running CBS News for the foreseeable future. But there have been questions, including a report in Puck that David Rhodes, the former CBS News chief, and what was his role at Fox News? He was a senior executive there?
Something to that effect.
I think so. Yeah. So there was this report that he was in talks. Oliver, did you talk to him, or did you talk to people in his world this week? We had a story in Status that it looks like Ellison and Rhodes may not actually be pairing up for CBS News down the road.
Yeah, I think it remains to be seen. I can confirm that there were conversations between Rhodes and Skydance, and I think that remains to be seen. I did talk to George Cheeks, who is now overseeing the linear television assets over at the new Paramount. So that includes CBS News. And I asked him, I said, is Tom Schabrowski, the current president of CBS News, is he your guy? Or are you guys looking to bring in someone else? And George Cheeks didn't give a definitive answer on Tom Schabrowski, but he did say he loves Tom Schabrowski. And he did give a pretty heavy endorsement for Tom Schabrowski. So it would be surprising, I think, if they deviated from that decision to at least have him in there for the foreseeable future. I did some reporting as well, and certainly there's going to be no imminent announcement about David Rhodes coming in at CBS News to take the reins. So at least, like you said, for the foreseeable future, Tom Schabrowski, who is widely liked and a pretty well-respected industry veteran, he was over at ABC News for a while, came in at CBS News earlier this year, and has talent likes him. So he's going to be in that seat for a little bit, and maybe he's going to maybe he's going to keep that seat. It seemed like George likes him a lot. He said he loves him. That was his words. Now, it still was a different answer, though. I asked George Cheeks, is there going to be any changes at CBS Sports leadership? Because he oversees that as well. And he said, no, the team in there is first class and great, and that's going to stay the same. He wouldn't give the same definitive answer in terms of CBS News. And I think a lot remains to be seen. Is Barry Weiss coming in? Like, what's going to happen there? But he did throw his endorsement or his weight, behind Tom, which I found to be notable.
Right. It is interesting that the David Rhodes situation maybe isn't working out, and we also have not heard anything about the Barry Weiss potential acquisition of the Free Press. We had reported previously that she could be in the contention in a senior role at CBS News. I think that sort of set off some shockwaves and dropped some jaws across the newsroom there. Maybe sparked some worries about the future direction. I almost wonder if that was more signaling to the public, to the administration, that we're planning to come in and that we're taking this idea seriously of representing conservatives in our newsroom in a meaningful way. But there was discussion today at the press conference about this ombudsman that CBS also agreed to, I understand. And that was an agreement to get this deal across the finish line with the FCC, with Brendan Carr, who had really railed about the network's fairness, their accuracy, and their political coverage. Did they get, was Ellison or anyone asked about this ombudsman and who they're going to report to and how that's going to work?
Yeah, I mean, they talked about the ombudsman and they're going to monitor for bias and be professional. I mean, they played up the ombudsman as much as, as a professional person who's going to, if they see bias, I guess, call it out. I think what was interesting is I asked them a couple questions, but the one question I asked and I really pressed on was I asked everyone on stage, and it was not only David Ellison, but it was Jeff Shell, who's the president of Paramount, former NBC Universal executive, and I asked, and it was Jerry Carnell, who's the Redbird executive who's investing in Paramount, and Andy Gordon, another Redbird executive, is coming in as chief strategy officer at the new Paramount, and obviously David Ellison. I asked them all if they would commit not to meddling in 60 Minutes. Are they going to allow 60 Minutes, which has historically operated with autonomy, to continue operating independently, and are they not going to meddle? And frankly, I did not get a straight answer out of them. Initially, again, it was, in fairness to them, I asked a two-pronged question. I asked about 60 Minutes, and then I asked about the attacks on the media. David Ellison sort of addressed the attacks on the media by saying he always supports talent, but didn't address the 60 Minutes situation. And so then I followed up and I said, on 60 Minutes, just to be clear, no one's going to meddle with 60 Minutes. It's Tanya Simon, the new executive producer. She's going to be allowed to operate this show as she sees fit. No one's going to ask for a list of stories ahead of time. And frankly, I did not get a direct answer on that one. David Ellison said that his first meeting today was at CBS News, that's where he first started the day. And he did. He went in there, he addressed the CBS News staff. But I did not hear from anyone on stage, no, we will not meddle with 60 Minutes. Now, I did hear a broad answer from Jerry Carnell, who said that you don't buy news to influence the news, which was a very broad answer to a very specific question. But I think that's interesting. Are they going to require stories be sent up the chain? Is that something that's they're going to ask Tanya Simon? And there was talk, and we reported this as well, that George Cheeks, the person overseeing CBS, floated to then president of CBS News or head of CBS News, Wendy McMahon. Maybe you don't air the 60 Minutes season finale this time, and we do something else there. And so, there was meddling. We know that former executive producer Bill Owens literally resigned, citing meddling and interference from the corporation. And so this was a time, I think, where they could have said, of course, we're not going to touch 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes is an iconic news magazine. We do not want to taint it at all. We have full confidence in Tanya Simon and the team there. They're professionals, and we're going to allow them to do their job as they see fit. They did not say that. They basically said it's day one. I think actually David Ellison might have said that, but they did not provide a direct answer, John.
Wow. And that feels like such an easy layup. Of course, we're going to defend this organization. And of course, we would, not meddle in its political affairs. And it's surprising that they wouldn't just say these words and, assuage concerns both internally and externally. That show obviously has been through the ringer with the former executive producer stepping down and, Donald Trump heavily weighing on that show, screaming and raging about it on Truth Social because of its coverage of him, questions over whether or not it had, almost held up this deal because of its coverage. And Sherry Redstone, the, now former controlling shareholder of Paramount, asking for information about it ahead of time. It's kind of incredible that they didn't just say that show is going to have the most autonomy. We are going to return this network to its pristine Tiffany network era, and didn't want to do it.
Well, they did. I mean, he did say that he respects the legacy of the Tiffany Network's news division, and he said those things. But at one point, I think we were going back and forth, and I'm getting credit for them for just taking questions. I mean, this is something that's very rare. It's not like any news organization. I've never been to a press conference really like this. So credit to them for taking the questions. And we went back and forth had a nice volley there. And I think he said at one point that it's day one of the new Paramount, and they were, basically going to see how things shake out. And I said, well, you must have thought about this, given that 60 Minutes has sort of been at the center of getting this deal across the finish line with Donald Trump's lawsuit, the settlement, all of that. And, there was no direct answer. And I think that, again, while we credit them for taking the questions, a lot of the questions did not have direct answers to them that will make these questions go away.
All right. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about their response to the cancellation of Stephen Colbert's show and what George Cheeks told you about the future of Jon Stewart's show. All right, we're back. So Oliver, today at the Paramount headquarters in Times Square, where they held this press conference, did anybody bring up, did you ask about the reaction to the shock cancellation of Stephen Colbert and The Daily Show, the Late Show? It's been on the air for decades now, from the David Letterman era. No one could believe that this decision came when it did. Obviously, it's been filled with political contention, with, observers, Stephen Colbert himself, Jon Stewart going on his show, really needling Paramount and Skydance brass over this decision, saying that this is, more or less a bending of the knee to Donald Trump, taking chief critics, even funny, late night hosts off the air. Did this get brought up today, and what was their response?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, people asked about Stephen Colbert, and it first came during the press conference where a question was asked about really the future of late night. And one of the things that they emphasized, what George Cheeks actually emphasized, was that this was a program losing money. And again, this is the talking points that they've been putting out there, and that they needed to cancel it for that reason. Now, I did talk to David Ellison again afterward. And I asked him, did you agree with the decision by George Cheeks to cancel the show before, the deal closed, before you became the boss of Paramount? Because I said, David, you can reverse decision. You can snap your fingers like that and reverse the decision now if you want to. If you disagreed with it, you could bring back Stephen Colbert. And he told me that he said he learned about the decision the day of it was announced, and said that he wouldn't second guess George Cheeks, and said that he wanted to stress that decisions like that are made on based on a financial perspective. Indicating, again, trying to say it wasn't made for a political purpose. But obviously, Stephen Colbert was in that room and in the air, basically, when this discussion was happening. Actually, I talked to George Cheeks afterwards, and I asked him about his relationship these days with Stephen Colbert, and he didn't really have an answer to that. So I sensed that maybe it's not so good.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine.
Credit to the Paramount for letting me just go talk to the most senior executives and ask all these questions, because this does not happen every day. I think if any other media company is paying attention, please welcome us into your headquarters, serve us lunch, and let us question and interrogate your most executives for a couple hours. That would be lovely. I'm looking at you, David Zaslav, and I'm looking at you, Bob Iger. At least they did this. They did not have to.
It's a good point. I mean, hats off to them for the transparency. That is really great. But back to the actual questions that were asked there. So the Colbert thing, it sounds like they are really Ellison and Shell and Co. It sounds like they are really sticking to this idea that the show was a money loser. We'd seen reports that it was losing somewhere around $40 million a year. But let's be realistic, right? There were ways to cut back on a show's expenses like that. Yes, it's in the Ed Sullivan Theater in New York. That's got to be expensive to own and operate, turn the lights on and staff. Maybe even go to Stephen and say, look, maybe we can't afford to pay your top dollar salary, or we're going to have to slim it down like we've talked before. Maybe not have the band. Still seems like a questionable decision, but okay. So the other big question that's hanging in the air then is, what is the future of Jon Stewart and The Daily Show? He's back on the air there, obviously, right now on a temporary basis, only doing Monday nights, but it's still a big draw to the network. There's only really 2 shows, and we're going to talk about both of them on Comedy Central that even keep the network basically alive, and that's The Daily Show and South Park. And they are both really bringing the heat, especially about Donald Trump, his administration, which has to be a constant source of, I don't know, heartburn within Paramount and Skydance. So what are they saying about Jon Stewart, whose contract I think is up next year, right?
Yeah, I when I was having some time with George Cheeks, I asked him. I said, "Is Jon Stewart's contract going to get renewed?" Asked him pretty point blank, and he indicated, his answer was, this seemed like the default answer for a lot of questions they didn't want to answer. It's day one of the new company. We're just getting settled in. The deal just closed. Give us some time. We need to figure this sort of thing out. And I told him, I said, well, isn't it, about that time that you would be negotiating Jon Stewart's contract, because his contract's up in December. Typically for a deal like this, it's negotiated months in advance. And again, he reiterated, I believe, said something about it being day one. So clearly not answering that question and not committing to renewing Jon Stewart. Now, maybe they will, but he did not have a direct answer on Jon Stewart's future. And look, if Stephen Colbert was expensive and he was CBS's most recognized personality, Jon Stewart's on Comedy Central. So I'm not sure how the economics there are, but it's hard to imagine that if they can't make money off Stephen Colbert's CBS show, that they're going to maybe commit to the salary of Jon Stewart on The Daily Show. I think that remains to be seen.
Yeah, interesting. And okay, so South Park, which came out just this week with a new episode that absolutely was blistering with Kristi Noem, her face melting off. She's shooting puppies. This is 2 weeks, or 2 episodes, I should say, in a row in which they have just taken direct aim in the most punishing and brutal satire of this administration. The first one, of course, with Donald Trump with a, talking miniature penis. This is incredible stuff. And this is going out on Comedy Central and on Paramount Plus. Ellison and Skydance, with Paramount's, permission there, signing a big new deal with Trey Parker and Matt Stone. Those are the South Park creators. So they are definitely not jumping off of that ship. But clearly this has got to, again, stir up some uncomfortability. Was there any discussion about what the future looks like with them and whether or not they might have to turn it down a notch, or if they're going to have creative freedom?
Well, David Ellison was very supportive of the show's creators. He said, I was talking to him again afterward with a couple other reporters, and he said he had not seen the most recent episode of South Park, in which Kristi Noem is mimicked shooting puppies in a very graphic fashion. He had not seen that episode. He said the reason he hadn't seen it yet is because it doesn't stream on the same day it airs, and he was on a plane and couldn't watch the live feed, but also hadn't seen it yet because it hadn't been on Paramount Plus basically until the next day. That was what he said. But he did say he's been a fan of South Park for a long time. Yeah, he said he supports the show's creators. I did think it was interesting. He said that the show has a long history of needling both sides, or needling everyone, sort of indicating to me, yes, Donald Trump is in the crosshairs now, but these guys go after everyone, and they're going to go after the Democrats too. And I thought that was, again, interesting. It was we're not going to only target Republicans. He was basically suggesting that this is a show that offends everyone, but he did stand by it.
Okay, so there's been fears within CBS that there might be more, and actually broadly across Paramount, we continue to see these sort of incremental layoffs across the company, from the studio division to the cable division. Was there any discussion today, now that Ellison is taking over, Skydance is taking over, on what the future holds? He obviously, with his father's massive multi-billion-dollar chest of tech dollars, has the ability to really invest into the future of Paramount in a way that Hollywood has known for some time that this company was really in decline under Sherry Redstone and her family. He's coming in now flush with cash, talking about how technology is going to be at the core of what they do moving forward. I don't think we know anything about that in detail, but he does seem to come with a decent, healthy wallet here. But everyone is still worried that there's going to be layoffs. So was there any discussion about what the future holds for their staff?
I mean, there was a lot of questions, or not a lot, but there's a few questions about cuts coming, what cuts are going to be coming. And, it's not like they said, we're going to cut here and there. They did talk about investing in certain areas, but I thought it was notable that Jeff Shell, who by the way, John, said status in this is his words. He said status is the hottest thing. So thank you, Jeff Shell. He actually said he subscribes twice. He gets 2 newsletters from us every night.
Wow.
He says he was asked on stage. They all were like, what are you most looking forward to when, about running this company, about being in this situation here? And Jeff Shell notably said he's very much looking forward to the company running it efficiently. And anyone knows anything about efficiency, that's a code word for we're going to streamline things, which is another code word for get rid of overlap, which means certainly cuts are coming. And I don't think that's going to be surprising. I've been told, that there are cuts coming, and I think anytime there's a big merger like this, where you have Skydance merging with Skydance or with Paramount, there's going to be overlap. Some jobs are going to be eliminated. They would say, of course, they're going to be reinvesting in certain areas, growth areas, but undoubtedly they're going to have to make some cuts. And they alluded to having more of their strategy laid out during the next earnings call, which I believe is in the fall at some point. So we'll hear more from them at that point when they address investors. They did just come into this company. They've been thinking about it for a while, but they basically kept saying, we need a little bit of time. It's been day one. We need some time to figure out how things are going to shake out here. So we'll hear more about that in the future, but certainly seems like cuts are coming across the company.
Yeah, I'm very curious what they're going to do, especially with the cable division that is really a sort of a shell of its former glory of the Viacom days where, these were must-watch channels on your cable lineup. You couldn't wait to watch what was going to happen. And maybe I'm dating myself now, but what was on MTV and what was on Comedy Central, I guess VH1, I guess maybe not. But these channels used to actually have first run shows. You'd come home and people would watch them. Man, remember like the TRL days on MTV? Like every band wanted to be on that show. And now it's like, what is even on MTV anymore? It's like reruns. I think there's something that's first run on there, but I can't even remember the last time I watched it. So you can imagine
one night a week. It's like the VMAs are on MTV and people kind of watch MTV, but even that show has, that award show has decreased significantly in popularity. I mean, I remember, I think it was at the VMAs when Kanye West went after Taylor Swift, and it was a huge deal. People barely talk about the VMAs in that way anymore.
All right. Well, when we come back, we're going to be talking about Sean Hannity lashing out at Trump's critics as this MAGA Civil War over foreign policy and the Jeffrey Epstein files continues to rage on. All right, welcome back. So, Oliver, this week, the MAGA Civil War continues to rage over Donald Trump, his policies, the Jeffrey Epstein files. Sean Hannity, who has sort of become like Trump's defender-in-chief over the years. As we've known in the first administration, he would talk to Trump on the phone regularly. I imagine that's probably still happening to a certain extent. Sean Hannity went on his show this week, I think on his radio show, right? And really lashed out at other MAGA media personalities, surely trying to shake them up, saying people that claim to be Trump supporters, how dare they criticize Trump on things? Is anyone going to be perfect? No, he says. And this is obviously coming after Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and others, many podcasters and social media personalities who reliably defended Trump, who told people to vote for Trump just a couple of months ago at the election. have now sort of raised all kinds of questions. Oh my gosh, I can't even forget. Joe Rogan raising serious questions about Donald Trump's immigration policy, rounding up people. And now Sean Hannity's furious about this and trying to sort of like get the troops back in line. What do you think? Is this sort of a response from Trump world that to try to basically get the troops back together in line and say, hey, he's not perfect, but he's our guy. And what do you want, Kamala Harris instead?
Yeah, I mean, Sean Hannity is Donald Trump's chief propagandist. So perhaps in his brain, it just doesn't compute that people would have some independent thoughts and some criticism of Donald Trump and voice that criticism. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, that's what we're seeing now. You alluded to Joe Rogan criticizing Donald Trump. Andrew Schulzes criticized Donald Trump. Candace Owens says she's embarrassed. She told people to vote for Donald Trump. Tucker Carlson at times has gone after Donald Trump. A lot of these people are not necessarily all in on the propaganda the way Sean Hannity is, and they're voicing dissent with the government. And Sean Hannity is, I guess, triggered by that, really frustrated by that, because not only once, but a couple times this week, he's gone on his radio show and questioned basically whether these people are even part of the MAGA camp. You know, he said he's growing very cynical that they're part of the MAGA camp, and said that he thinks, this is what Sean Hannity's saying, that these people are chasing clicks and chasing views, and they have to say outrageous stuff and disagree with Donald Trump to get attention these days. And I don't know, I thought it was really telling for a couple of reasons. One, Sean Hannity's kind of telling on himself that he's only ever supportive of Donald Trump. I mean, when is the last time Sean Hannity went on air and disagreed with Donald Trump? I mean, these two are in lockstep all the time. So Hannity himself is telling on himself. He doesn't have independent thoughts. He only goes on air and gives the pro-Trump spin night after night. But at the same time, I thought it was interesting that Sean Hannity is really lashing out at new media in a way that Donald Trump did with Tucker Carlson a few weeks ago or a couple months ago when he said to Tucker, get a TV show if you want people to listen to you. Sean Hannity's sort of been a guy, he's been an establishment voice for so long, right? He's really had a foothold or a stranglehold on the conservative base. And for the first time, or you're really seeing podcasters like Joe Rogan give someone like Sean Hannity a run for his money. And I almost felt like Sean Hannity was sort of lashing out of defense. And it was almost like old media guy trying to fend off the new folks on the internet, like Candace Owens, who are criticizing Donald Trump. And I thought that was just an interesting dynamic there, because on Fox News, everyone's really supportive of Donald Trump. But out there in new media, you're seeing a lot of dissent these days. And it's making Sean Hannity apparently quite uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's clearly like an effect of the fracturing of the media landscape. And Fox and talk radio used to completely just dominate the right-wing landscape from coast to coast. And their narratives, if they decide they want to change the subject, or they decide that they want to take a particular view on an issue, including a defense of the current administration, then that's what the base is going to hear. And unless you're going to go to the quote mainstream press, where else are you going to get that alternative view on it? And Republicans have been programmed for decades now not to trust the mainstream media. They're not going to trust the Times, even the Associated Press, brands and media companies that have existed with great reputations as being neutral, reporting the facts. But we're seeing this landscape now where Hannity and others who command sizable audiences have lost control of the message. This reminds me a lot of how Trump himself has lost control of the narrative around the Jeffrey Epstein saga. Mm-hmm. Others like Tucker Carlson have straight up said, like, this is a disaster for this administration and called for Pam Bondi to resign over it. We've seen Donald Trump just continue to take her side, continue to defend her. But I think that this has shown that it continues to split the base. Some great new research from Media Matters that just came in this week that it just perfectly it says everything about the narrative control. And that is that Fox has now devoted 7 times more of its coverage to covering the Sydney Sweeney, let's say, online micro, I don't even know. It's like
The sideshow.
hubbub. It's like what is this thing? Versus the very real Jeffrey Epstein files that are very much being covered up at this point. And the network clearly has made a conscious decision to completely sweep this story under the rug and move away to any shiny object that they can. And then you see Sean Hannity go on the air and command respect from the troops, that they get in line and that they do what Donald Trump says. It's a remarkable moment.
And I think it's also, a lot of focus has been on the dissent over Jeffrey Epstein, which is all anything, it obviously motivates the base. But even before then, I think we saw dissent with Iran and the Iran strikes and Trump's foreign policy. And most notably, I think, we're seeing dissent within immigration, where that was one of the main issues Donald Trump ran on. And you're seeing Joe Rogan blast Donald Trump over his immigration policy and how they're treating immigrants in this country. You're seeing Andrew Schulz, the comedian who is pro-Trump, blast Donald Trump over his immigration policy. And Andrew Schulz said, this is not what I voted for. This is not what I voted for. These people thought that Donald Trump, I guess, was serious when he said, and this shows how naive they are, but they thought he was serious, I guess, when he said they was only going to target the people who are actually breaking the law and maybe committing, violent acts. And now we're seeing them recoil, John, as Donald Trump targets just people who are trying to make a living, on farms or in the service industry, and send them to Alligator Alcatraz, where we're seeing reports that these people are being denied basic, human care. And that I think there was one report that said that they had to beg for food like dogs or eat food like dogs or something disturbing, that the AC was turned on so high that they were unable to sleep because it was so cold. And Donald Trump, for the first time, I think, is getting a lot of pushback from these it's not like Joe Rogan doesn't have an audience, right? Donald Trump came into office because he had the support of Joe Rogan and Andrew Schulz. That was a whole theme, how the pro-men podcasters had ushered Donald Trump in. So when they go on and they very forcefully call him out and say that this is a bad thing and this is wrong, I think it matters. Now, Donald Trump obviously is not running again, or at least, maybe he will try to run again, but, he theoretically can't run again for president. So maybe he doesn't care as much about winning again. But, the midterms are coming up, and it's going to be very interesting to see, does someone like Andrew Schulz say, go vote for the Democrats? I was listening to him the other day, and he said something to the effect of that the only pro-America first party right now is the Democrats. And he was saying Bernie Sanders and Zoran Mandami are pro-America first and not the Republicans. And so
Schulz said that.
Schulz said that, yeah. And so it's going to be very interesting to see in the midterms what happens.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And I agree with you. It's a big deal. It's very easy, I think, to slip into the place of like, LOL, nothing matters, because things are just wild and beyond your control. As you mentioned, like, Alligator Alcatraz is popping up. Human rights abuses are being reported with immigrants. And it's incredibly disturbing. These things are happening. It's easy to just fall into a pit of despair. Believe me, I feel like I'm on the verge of it. But these things do actually matter when these important voices online react to this. We've seen a few recent polls with Donald Trump's approval rating now into the 30s or hovering around 40%. That means parts of the Republican base is starting to question whether or not, and that has a really significant impact on, like you said, the upcoming elections. And also, I think this gets to members of Congress some of whom are under pressure back at home. These things do matter. Some of these people, these podcasters and these other online MAGA influencers might sort of seem distant, but they do command an audience. And I think that pulled together collectively, they are rather influential. And if it's Schultz or if it's Joe Rogan saying these things to the audience that like Trump is going too far, he's rounding up people in the Home Depot parking lot in Torrance, like, what the hell is happening here? I didn't vote for this. Like, that's gonna really land. That is gonna make a difference.
On that note too, John, we should mention that Donald Trump called in a CNBC, his old friend Joe Kernens, who has been a huge MAGA supporter and big Trump supporter for a long time. And it was remarkable because even Joe Kernens was not having the talking points that Donald Trump was spitting at him. Donald Trump said he had the highest poll, record poll numbers. Joe Kernens repeatedly said that's not true. Donald Trump tried to contest the results of the 2020 election. Again, Joe Kernens responded, even your own Justice Department said that wasn't accurate at the time. Donald Trump was talking about the labor statistics being unfair. Joe Kernens said that it was ridiculous, basically, to suggest that those results were rigged for political purposes, and said that what he had done, which was to fire the head of Bureau of Labor Statistics, was undermining confidence in the government's numbers. And so even in Donald Trump, he probably thought he's calling up his old friend. It's going to be a safe space. When Donald Trump last time called into Joe Kernens' show last year, it was unchallenged. This time, Joe Kernens was firing back at Donald Trump. And so, again, this is another example where Donald Trump's supporters are clearly not very happy or enthusiastic these days with how he's operating. And again, you can, to your point, just write it off as if it doesn't matter. But I actually do think this does matter. And people on Wall Street listen to Joe Kernens, and I'm sure there are a lot of people that he was speaking for who supported Donald Trump, thought he was going to usher in a pro-business community, and have been alarmed at how he's been running things from that perspective. Then there are people who listen to Joe Rogan and Andrew Schultz, who thought he was going to be one way on immigration and have been disappointed seeing the way he's done stuff. And then there are people listening to Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, who thought Donald Trump was going to be more of an isolationist, America First person, and saw what he did with Iran. And you add this stuff up over and over and over again, and it compounds and it matters. And Sean Hannity telling these people to hush and to basically shut up and get on board with Donald Trump, I don't think that's going to work these days. And Sean Hannity is losing his stranglehold over the MAGA base. And I think he's, that's probably a little bit alarming to him and to Donald Trump.
The irony of Sean Hannity trying to create a safe space for Donald Trump. But here we are. Everything comes full circle. All right. Well, Oliver, it's been another heck of a week. I'm looking forward to seeing you this coming weekend. I was supposed to be there last week in New York. My flight could not get off the ground. You guys had this terrible storm. If you could get your flooding under control for once, that would be really nice. I don't know what is going on in the Northeast these days, but I literally couldn't even fly there at all last weekend. So
yeah, New York was rejecting you. The city decided not to allow you into our airspace. We hope that you are allowed this week to come in. You're coming for the 1-year anniversary of Status, which is going to be just in a few days, and we're excited to celebrate with you when you get here.
I can't wait. Champagne and I don't know, tacos. Let's do maybe we'll do some fun tacos.
No. You're gonna write the newsletter as we go out and celebrate.
Oh,
that's
man.
That's why you're actually coming here.
I can't
You
wait.
think you're gonna be part of the champagne celebration?
Look, I would be honored. I just sweep the floors around here. So, yes, sir. Oliver, I'll catch you this weekend. I hope you have a wonderful one, and thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you here next week. Power Lines is presented by Status and hosted by Oliver Darcy and me, John Passantino. The show is produced by Matt Havia and Antonio Enriquez in association with In the Arena Studios. Please like, share, and subscribe to Power Lines on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen, and watch full episodes and clips on our YouTube page at Status.